Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He's also a black belt in Japanese Jiu Jitsu. He travels and teaches seminars all over the world, and when he's not traveling, he teaches out of Fighting Fit BJJ in Stafford, England. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today by Chris the Villain Paynes. How are you today, Chris?
Hello, sir. I'm good, thank you. Happy to finally be on your wonderful podcast.
I greatly appreciate that, my friend. It's great to have you here as well. Chris, you have a really interesting introspective in jiu-jitsu that I'm very interested in delving into. But before we do that, the question I always like to start with, tell us about where you're from originally and what your life was like up until the point that you found jiu-jitsu.
So I'm from Stafford, which most people are never going to know where it is. It's middle England.
Cool.
I don't think you could get more middle. So my gym is in Stafford. I started Japanese Jiu-Jitsu when I was 20 years ago, and then found submission wrestling 2009. Officially, I've never actually done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've never been part of a BJJ gym, despite now having a black belt in it. I used to be a firefighter for about 12 years. And then pretty much since meeting Fanatics and how well things went with Dan and the folks, Jiu-Jitsu really took off, and I didn't have time for work anymore, so this is all I do now. I'm fully in the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, as it were.
Living the dream, man. That's excellent. Well, good for you, man. That's awesome. It's cool seeing people being able to, even though you did something that was very worthwhile. I mean, being a firefighter is obviously tremendously a great career to have. It's cool that you're able to find your passion and follow your passion. I always love hearing stories of people being able to do that. I think it's also really interesting that you mentioned that you found submission grappling and you didn't actually train jiu-jitsu formally, but you did end up getting a black belt in it eventually. How did your introduction to grappling occur? What was the story there?
So I got my black belt in traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu around about 2008. So I would have been about 21. And we did a little bit of like ground fighting. I didn't really know about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at this point. I think I was on the Bushido forums, and every time I saw someone mention BJJ, I thought it stood for blowjob job. So like, and I thought, and I thought UFC was very similar to like WWE and was scripted. So I had paid no attention to combat sports. And then, so we did a little bit of like ground fighting in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, where it was essentially, you'd start back to back, you turn around, and it was the first person to kind of wrestle the other person over and get scarf hold. So we didn't have guard, we didn't really have submissions, and it was in like karate gis. But I'm 21, I've got a black belt, and I think, don't really know anything about combat sports. I'm thinking, I can hold my own right now. So I entered this will be early 2009, I entered a judo newaza competition, and it was based on time in the sport, time grappling. At this point I had like 8 years. So I thought, okay, I'll enter. And about 3 weeks before the competition, I'd heard legends of Fighting Fit. It didn't have a website, it didn't have an internet presence or anything like that. It was literally just a number in a phone book. So I thought, you know what, I'll go down to this place, I'm a black belt, I'll kick their ass and stuff like that. Despite never really doing much groundwork, and they beat the shit out of me. They crushed me. And I had maybe 3 lessons of actual like guard and guard breaking and stuff like that. And I entered this judo newaza competition. And my first fight was against a BJJ blue belt. It went about as well as you think it would. My second fight was against a purple belt who flying armbarred me from kneeling.
Oh, damn.
And then my third fight was against a judo black belt. And considering at this point, I was in a karate gi, and I'd never seen a gi choke before.
Yeah.
I screamed when he choked me. So at this point, like, people come to me, my students will say, have I got enough experience to like start competing? I'm like, if you had more than 3 lessons, you've had more than I had. Wow. Are you in a karate gi? No. So you're well prepared in my world.
Oh, that's so brutal. And like the karate gis, they're so thin, they're so foldable. So like you're just so chokeable if you're wearing something that thin,
dude, it was like a cheese wire to my neck. At that point, I was like, right, I need to learn how to do this. I had embarrassingly, I went to the gym soon after, and I'd never lifted weights before. And I put, I think, like 45 kilo on the bar. So like bar and like 10 kilo either side. And I dropped it on my chest. And so I had some dude come up to me, like literally single-handed deadlift off me because I was a weak little kid. Like I had no cardio, I had no strength. And what am I doing? Fighting people.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story, though. I love that. I love the enthusiasm of believing in yourself and just going out and testing yourself. And you know what, man? Like if you hadn't have done that, you wouldn't have found jiu-jitsu. You wouldn't have found Fight to Fit, and it would have been a completely different path possibly for you. So I mean, kudos to you for getting out there and trying, man.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so the gym, the Fighting Fit gym was submission wrestling, and we didn't really have technique. It was about just who could be more violent. And so we didn't have gis or anything like that. It was very cold in the gym. I think I was the first person to ever own a rash guard. And the only techniques we had, like my coach only knew one guard pass by plunging my head into the ground, like neck crank style. And that's the only guard pass I knew for a long time. And, it was literally that and heel hooks, but not good heel hooks, just like 50-50 cranks. And that was about it.
Yeah.
And then so those guys that had been there for like 5 years or so. And so I bought Jiu-Jitsu University, and I bought, the Eddie Bravo books, and I think Greg Jackson's book. And I was just picking techniques out of that. And this is like very early YouTube. I think you had Submissions 101, and that was about it.
That's incredible.
And then when my coach left about 6 months in, and the gym owner basically looked at me and went, "Look, you're probably the only person in this place that can read. Why don't you look after it until your coach comes back?" So there were guys that have been there for like 5 years, but no one had any technique. And so it was like, "Look, you're the only person that can like pick up a book. So maybe you look after it until your coach comes back." Yeah. And that was 2009. And he hasn't come back yet.
Wow. That's incredible. So basically, if you're just capable of not burning the place down, you can be in charge. It's all good.
Literally. Yeah. And then 2010, it got a bit cold. Like, I say cold, I think in Celsius it was like -10 in the gym. So I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit.
Yeah. That's
something silly.
That's close to like 10 degrees. Yeah.
Yeah, and the water in the toilet froze, and so we were rolling around in no gi, and we just thought, you know what, should we get those gis that the BJJ guys wear, because it's really cold. And that is essentially how I learned jiu-jitsu, was being in a really cold gym and reading books. And so I can't really, it makes it even funnier that I got a black belt despite that being my only formal training.
Chris, you might be the first person I've ever talked to that got into the jiu-jitsu gi for function, for being warm, for warmth. So you're treating it like it was basically a jacket. That's what it came down to, is, man, we need like thicker, warmer material. That's what
exactly. Yeah. So we did the competitions, and guys would get us in like collar chokes and like lapel chokes, and we just look at them like, is this good? Do you win? Do I win? Like, I've never seen these before.
That's amazing, man. Well, now you mentioned that the gym itself was a submission grappling gym, and it was more of a brutal style. Was this like a catch wrestling lineage, or what was? Do you know what specifically the background was?
Yeah, so it was. I think my personal understanding is like Northern England has obviously a massive catch wrestling history, and you find that, I think, especially in those early days. Even 2009, there was a big no-gi scene in the north of the UK.
Sure.
And I think that, we kind of had maybe that disparity where the South maybe had like more martial arts and maybe more middle class, and people had gis, and especially around the big cities where Browder was in Birmingham, you had Roger in London. But outside of that, there wasn't really anything apart from these kind of like dingy warehouse. Going to those first competitions, it was kind of funny, and everyone at the venue would be shaved head or bald, tattoos, gruff looking guys, but all lining up to go for a wee because they're all like haven't made weight yet. And so it was very much like a working class kind of environment in the North. And it was, I think that was the general style was like catch, just miserable wrestling.
That's incredible, man. Well, now I know eventually you found your way under the guidance of Prit, who's obviously one of the most very, very, very decorated black belt. How did that happen? How did you guys first come in contact?
I've been a big part of the BJJ Globetrotters since their inception. Like being an independent gym, I met Christian Graugart just after he released the book. He just did a seminar in Bolton, just north of Manchester, and we ended up getting a train back to Manchester together. And he was talking about starting this affiliation for independent gyms. And I thought, well, we're not under anyone. It's just me, and I've got no one to promote me. So yeah, absolutely. Like, it sounds like a really cool idea. Like, I'm on board. And then he started doing the camps, and I started going to the camps as a white belt, and I got my belts through Christian, which it's the way Christian does it, which I guess kind of makes it unique, is that with the Globetrotters camps, you normally have quite a few black belts, 20 plus black belts appear. And anyone who hasn't got a coach can ask to be evaluated by those black belts. And they're all from different lineages. They can be from different organizations. And it has to be unanimously agreed. And so all my belts would then, I'd say like, Christian, would you mind checking me out? And he'd put a message out to all the other black belts. And then I have to have 20 black belts unanimously agree. Yeah, I'm a blue belt or a purple belt.
Wow.
So I got my belts initially that way. And then, I was I think purple belt, and I was holding my own in the UK. I was entering like open weight, higher belt, maybe brown belt, black belt divisions. I wasn't doing all right, getting a few medals and stuff. And then I went to the 2017 Copenhagen camp, and Preet, it was before he became big and he really took off. He was one of the coaches there, and I thought, this Estonian guy, I'm doing fine at black belt. I'll roll with this coach, or I'll give him a good run around. And he made me look like a child. Like people always say to me, who gave you the hardest role of your life? And I'd say Preet. He harassed me, and it was effortless. Like, I couldn't touch him. He was Teflon. And then he did what he wanted to me, and I said to him afterwards, what was I doing wrong? He went, you leave your elbows out. And I'd have my hands next to my chest, doing the normal T-Rex. And I'm like, they're not out. Like, I know how to hide my elbows by this point. I've been in the game for 8 years at this point. I'm not too dumb. Yeah. And it wasn't until the following camp in Heidelberg, about 2 months later, that I was watching one of his classes on the original Hawkins and Running Man. I was like, oh, I get it now. I understand. And I thought, my God, this guy's jiu-jitsu is something I can't even comprehend. And I was then started to pay for him to come to the UK every couple of months, and I was going over to Estonia, and then I think it was pretty much after that camp and the videos that he was then making were coming out that he really took off. And I then, got my black belt from Preet in 2019.
That's really incredible, man. Well, he's well known for his specifically his defense focused jiu-jitsu, and that's actually something I'd really like to pick your brain on. When I mentioned in the intro that you have a really cool perspective of jiu-jitsu, that's what I was referring to. So if you don't mind, today's theme will be about focusing on defense for overall jiu-jitsu development. Chris, obviously it's easy to become entranced by the offensive capabilities of jiu-jitsu. And look, I get it. Like, there's nothing like landing a good submission. Landing submissions is awesome. But why, in your opinion, is it so crucial to build defense early and maintain your defensive development as you advance in the art?
So I think what's kind of interesting is, I think maybe my start in jiu-jitsu made things a bit more difficult maybe, but because I didn't have anyone above me and I didn't really have technical input, I'd maybe travel to London. I'd, go to the occasional gym, maybe 6 to 9 months, if I had free time from work, and, I'd pick up a technique and I had to learn, try and understand why that technique was related to other techniques. Like if I learned a sweep, why does that sweep work as well as other sweeps? And so when I met Preet and he started talking quite conceptually about defense, I had a history in Muay Thai and I'd done some wrestling at this point as well. It kind of made sense. Like with BJJ, we can get into the habit of wanting a positive action, as in, he does X, I must do Y. And so everything has to be not as in I have to make progress, but there has to be an action I have to do. But compared to other combat sports, MMA, boxing, wrestling, they have a defensive posture, which they then fight out of, like a defensive posture, which kind of fixes 90% of their problems. As in, if a boxer doesn't want to get punched in the face, keep your hands up. If a wrestler doesn't want to get taken down, you keep your arms by your sides and keep your hips out of the way and keep your chin up. And that's what you learn from day one, and you keep that posture. But in jiu-jitsu, we didn't really have that. It's always, they're trying to pass my guard. His leg goes here. I must do this. Oh, but then his hand goes here. I must do this. And it creates this horrible Rolodex situation where you feel like you have to learn 1,000 different techniques. And that's kind of like where Preet's work, I think, sat, was I had all these escapes, positive actions, but I didn't just have something that just stopped everything that I could just go to instantly, and the game would stop. And we took this into our gym, and for about 6 months, none of us could get chokes on anyone else in the gym. Like gi chokes died overnight. We couldn't do clock chokes. We couldn't do bow and arrows. Everything had gone, and we realized that we were attacking people that had no defense, like no true defense, which, okay, maybe they could counter punch, but they couldn't hide their chin. So punching them in the face was pretty easy. And then when you eventually, I liken the analogy to, imagine training at a boxing gym and everyone fights with their hands by their sides. And they're all just slugging each other in the face. And then, you hear from Preet or myself, oh, maybe you should keep your hands up. And then you go back to your boxing gym and you put your hands up and everyone's like, what the hell? I can't punch you in the face anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, because I'm not letting you. You then, you can still hit them in the face and choose your moments to hit them in the face, but they can't hit you back. And that's what we suddenly realized, is that when I taught everyone in the gym to essentially cover their chin, none of us actually knew how to hit someone in the face and get past those hands. So it took a good 6 months to then find the gaps, which we now, we're hitting each other in the face again, but everything's a lot sharper. And the main compliment or whatever I hear off the guys in the gym and anyone I teach this to is that when you have that space denied to you, like the armpit space, when people are defending correctly, and then you meet someone who isn't, it's like Christmas. It's like, it's a gift. Like, oh my God, this is what it feels like again. And so it's maybe a bit frustrating is that people see it as defense and stalling and stuff like that. It sharpens attack more than anything else. And it's kind of funny that since Preet's work has come out and defensive jiu-jitsu has started to get a bit of traction, a lot of other people are talking about defense and like the importance of having strong defense from day one. Which again, it's one of the first things I ever showed to someone is we all remember our first day on the mats and just getting clowned by everyone in the room. And so whenever someone joins, I take them to the side and say, look, keep your arms down, keep your hands by your groin, your elbows on your legs. You'll survive a black belt. You're going to be a bit sore, but as long as you don't do anything and give me the gaps, you'll be all right. It's now up to you if you want to expose or not. If you want to try and attack me, it's going to suck. But if you stay still, don't move your arms, be a ball, you'll be fine. And it means that then it gets rid of that like white belt spaz, or whatever you want to call it, where people are just throwing their arms out and we say to everyone, keep your elbows in, but we don't give them context as to why. And I think that's kind of the main crux of it, is it's context for why jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu at this point.
That's excellent. No, I really like that, man. And I think it's great that you're giving that context from day one for your students, because it is something a lot of people miss out on. I think that, the allure of being able to submit someone and attack someone or take position or land a takedown or whatever offensive aspects of jiu-jitsu are out there, it feels like that's usually the bait that's used by a lot of school. Hey, we're going to show you how to choke people. We're going to show you how to take someone down. We're going to teach you how to hip toss somebody. And for a new student, it's like, oh, this is awesome. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the most important thing they need in that moment. What they need in that moment is to learn how not to get killed. You know what I mean? Like being able to have defense and get through a training session without getting smashed relentlessly seems to me, anyways, to be much more important than being able to build a significant offense from the very beginning of their development. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's finding that balance, like you say. It's like, you want to show how cool what we do is. Like, here's a rear naked choke, this is how you can put someone out, this is how you break someone's arm or throw someone, which is great, except you then give it to them and say, right, go spar. And they're like, well, I'm never going to do this because I'm just getting clowned by everyone. And so, yeah, you've got to really have that balance of, okay, here's some cool stuff. You ain't going to use it, but it gives you a rough idea of what we're aiming for. This is what you need on day one. This is how to cover your chin. And I think, applying it from that kind of boxing, combat sports, wrestling kind of background of, right, I know it's boring, I'm sorry, but you need to just know how to stay safe. And then we can give you the tools to then go forwards. And again, it's that it's definitely improved even since, the advent of YouTube, and you can see the level of coaching out there. But what's the criteria for being a black belt? Is being a badass. But that's not about being a coach. Like, that's not being able to properly explain what we do. And there's a lot of black belts who, they're absolute monsters, couldn't tell you why they're doing what they're doing. If you give me a very good teaching purple belt over a highly, a black belt who's very, very good in competition but can't explain jiu-jitsu, I'll probably get more out of the purple belt. And I think we're stuck in that way of, we teach how we were taught. Like, if I was to say someone, what's the first guard you'd teach a white belt? 90% of people would say close guard. And I'd say, why? I don't know. That's what I was taught first. But is that the right one? Would open guard make more sense? Yeah, because if you fail your close guard, you can go to open guard. So why don't we teach them open guard? I don't know. And we teach how we were taught because it's safe. It's majority of us aren't coaches, and to step outside of dogma and how things have always been done, you don't want to mess up your students because it's the established way. So you just do as it has always been, and to suddenly kind of throw everything out the window and go, no, actually, screw guard, screw teaching anything we've ever done normally. Here's defense. Here's how to stay safe. Let's see how we can get on from here.
That's a great point, man. It's interesting that you say that, because that is something I am starting to notice in modern jiu-jitsu. Like when I visit other schools or see a beginner's class being taught, there are a lot of things that are being taught now in beginner's classes that I was like, oh wow, man, I didn't really understand that concept or learn that concept until I was a purple belt. That's awesome that whoever's designing this curriculum is showing them things that really would help them if they learned it earlier. So it's cool that you follow that mindset as well, because like you said, it's not everywhere, but I am seeing it more now, which is really nice. And you have to assume that has a lot to do with the overall rising tide of skill in jiu-jitsu. I think that, the overall level of ability that's out there now is, in my opinion, better than when I first started, 12 years ago. So,
exactly.
Chris, there's something else you said there that I really wanted to point out, because I think it's important. You mentioned the idea of when someone's working defense, they might have the subconscious thought of feeling like they're stalling or being boring to roll with. And I like that you said that, because I think it's a very common thing people would feel if they're just defending everything, if they're just protecting their neck, if they're just trying to escape positions, and really spend their mat time focusing on their defense. But it's such an important part of the puzzle, man. Like being able to not be submitted as easily is truly, I mean, the first step for anyone to start making a good offense anyways. What are your thoughts on that? What advice would you give someone if they start feeling self-conscious about that, about the way they roll, if they're focusing on defense?
I think I mean, as much as it's written on every door, on every gym in the land, it says, leave your ego at the door. That's nonsense. Like you wouldn't try and get better if it wasn't for your ego. That's why we compete. That's why we want to improve. It should say, don't be an asshole. Like you can have an ego. Yeah. Just don't be an asshole about it.
Yeah.
And eventually, you can think you're stalling and stuff like that, but that ego in you will say, eventually I want to win. So you'll come out of that shell. But you should have that choice that you can return to it. I mean, I liken it to like Conor McGregor. When you see him fight like Eddie Alvarez, there's that famous picture with him, like it was his hands behind his back and his chin up in the air. I think Conor knows how to hide his chin, but he can make a choice on whether to expose it or not. You put Conor against Floyd, there's no picture of Conor doing that in front of Floyd because Floyd would have taken his face off.
Yeah.
And that then becomes the crux is that, I can then, it's my choice on how tight my defense is. As in, if I'm against a very, very good black belt, I mean, last time I was in the States, I got to roll with Frank Rosenthal at Ryan Hall's gym. And obviously Frank's a monster. Yeah. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to be really exposing my gaps to him. He's going to kill me. So I played a much tighter game. My knees and my elbows rarely left each other. But then against someone like a blue belt or a purple belt, who I feel like I'm more comfortable against, I can expose those gaps. It's fun, but it's a choice I can make. And it's almost like by not teaching people about those gaps, and that it's a choice that they can make. It's almost like trying to teach boxing by just showing people the Eddie versus Conor picture. Like, right, here you go. Here's a boxing stance, chin up, hands behind your back, figure it out. And maybe eventually, I've not met a black belt yet that doesn't instinctively hide the gaps, but is that by accident or is that by design? Like, you can't really get good in jiu-jitsu without hiding those gaps. I mean, we teach people to shrimp. Why? Because it reconnects your elbow to your knee. But do we tell them why? It's to stop people controlling you. We just show them the technique, and eventually you kind of figure it out. And so it's again, like, it's fantastic. BJJ Fanatics is a brilliant example of it. With Danaher, with Lachlan Giles, with all these fantastic minds that are now in the sport. The pedagogy is improving. Their teaching and coaching practices are really coming on, and to see how jiu-jitsu has evolved even in the past 5 years is mind blowing, and it gives me hope for the future.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah, for sure. Well, there's something else you said there too. You mentioned the importance of that elbow and knee connection, and that's actually something I wanted to pick your brain on too. What do you think, like technically, are some of the most important defensive body posture habits that people can have, and that are important to understand early on? You mentioned the elbow and knee connection. Is there anything else that you like to really preach to your students to make sure they understand from the beginning?
I think there's pretty much it's wrestling, as in, we are doing ground and the control points of grappling are kind of universal. Don't let anyone behind your head. Don't let anyone in the space between your legs and armpits. Don't let anyone behind your knees. And that's what you learn in wrestling. If someone goes behind your knee in wrestling, you sprawl it out, you get rid of it. If someone goes behind your head, you clear it. And if someone goes into your armpits, you pummel it out. This is day one wrestling. But that's the exact same in jiu-jitsu. Like, every control in jiu-jitsu, major control, such as side control, mount, north-south, close guard, whatever, is when someone inhabits that space between your knees and your armpits, with your legs and your armpits. And so, again, it's a kind of like positive action thing. We wait till someone's doing that thing in side control, in close guard, to then just get them out again. And so, what's the first thing you learn from side control? Shrimp. Why? Because you reconnect in that space. What's the first thing you learn as a white belt in close guard? Drive your elbows into their legs to then open their legs and then do a double unders pass. Why? Because it gets them out of your armpits. And so we're doing this already. It's just we're doing it after the fact. It's a positive action instead of just do it before. And so it takes that complete change on how we teach a jiu-jitsu class. Instead of doing, right, I'm in this situation, I need to get out of it. It's like, right, this is how I stop all those situations happening in the first place. And so essentially it's no different to teaching a wrestling class, as in I'm not going to let anyone behind. If someone goes behind my head, I clear it. I'm going to keep my elbows tight so they can't get into my armpits. And, you know, you think of like most guards outside of closed guard, like half guard, De La Riva, they all require you to be behind someone's knee. Like, you know, if you were to replace your legs with your arms in half guard, it'd just be a single leg. Why are you letting people single leg you? And the main defense to that is clear them from behind your knee. And it's funny that you can almost, you could say, right, okay, it's almost like a check sheet, as in if you're in someone's guard, and you say, right, are they behind my head, in between my knees and armpits, or behind my legs? Yes or no? If they are, get rid of them. And once they're out of that space, climb into the space between their legs and armpits. That's every guard pass ever. But we teach millions of different variations of it. The same idea. And you can pretty much take that idea, type BJJ guard pass into YouTube afterwards. And that's the exact makeup of every single guard pass. But it never has that context. It's always like, oh, the grip has to be 2 inches here and 3 inches there. And it's missing the wood for the trees a little bit. And so everything I'm always doing is to explain that, as in just deny them that space. And then it's the same with like gi chokes, for example. Majority of gi chokes require that kind of accuracy. You have like maybe, if you imagine taking someone's back, you have a collar grip around their neck. One hand is to do the choke, but the other hand is to stop them from spinning, like you're holding onto the other side of the gi. And that was the main thing that we found, was that as soon as that hand kind of appears around the neck, if you just act like a lawnmower motor and just pull, like, just follow the hand that's choking you, you spin out of the choke. And then we realized that the chokes we're doing only work against people who are just staying still and giving us their armpits. As soon as that's kind of denied, you realize that position before submission actually makes a lot of sense. And then finally, when it comes to joint locks, if you think that as soon as you identify the joint you want to tear, like elbow, knee, whatever, you want to control the joints flanking it. So if I want to heel hook someone, I want to control their hip and their ankle. If I wanted to armbar someone, I need to control their shoulder and their wrist. So the furthest joints you can submit of mine are my ankles and my wrists, which means the next available joint you need to control are my elbows and knees. But if I just deny you my elbows and knees by keeping my arms and legs tight, there are no joint submissions. And so literally that single idea kills guard. It kills offensive postures. It kills chokes. It kills joint locks. And so anytime I teach something, it's like, right, just reiterating that idea again, like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. It's because it stops this. And then as soon as you expose that on another person, take control over it. Do not let them have it back, because it's fleeting now. It's not, they're giving it to you. It's gained, it's earned, keep it. And every control suddenly got better.
That's incredible. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I really like the idea that you teach the importance of preemptive defensive skills. Because I think a lot of times when we think of defense in jiu-jitsu, we might get the mental picture of escaping a bad position, or, escaping a submission that's already been manifested, that's already happening to us right now. But I think what you said there is so important too, and it's important to keep in mind for people, is understanding the preemptive defenses before anything even happens, understanding the triggers and the positioning that happen that lead to a bad spot. And that's really great that you emphasize that with your students, man. I think that probably saves them a lot of trouble,
Exactly. Well, that's combat sports, as in that's what every other combat sport does. And it's kind of, it almost like we inhabit a weird space where we train like traditional martial artists still. Like we train like, Aikido practitioners, where we've got someone running at us and doing a very specific thing. And then we do a very specific thing back to them. But then we want to be combat sports athletes, but we don't train like them. Like boxing and wrestling has thousands of years of experience of doing this, but we still train like Japanese jiu-jitsu martial artists, where we know where our sport originally came from. And I think that's hindering us completely, as we haven't adapted to this, what we actually want to be. We have a great advantage. Jiu-Jitsu is awesome. But we haven't adopted the right teaching practices because majority of us aren't coaches. We're not teachers. It's not how we got our black belts.
Chris, something else I wanted to ask you about. Many people listening to this are going to have. We talked about the importance of specifically approaching training with the idea in mind of working on defense and being a more defensive player to sharpen that area of your game. For many people listening, they're not going to have a choice to work defense, especially newer students. Like you almost don't get to choose. Like your guard's going to get passed, or you'll get swept, and you'll end up in bad positions. Chris, if you could speak directly to those people that seem to inevitably start every role in a defensive cycle, what advice would you offer for them to make the best of it and not feel so bad about it?
I think the best advice is learn about that, what control is, learn about hiding those gaps between your I mean, it's weird in that I went to a Ryan Hall seminar 2011 when he came over for the ADCCs, and one of the things he said in passing, but kind of stuck with me even then, is that control is who inhabits that space between the knees and armpits. And this was, 12 years ago now. And it wasn't until I met Pre 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is later, that I suddenly realized what Ryan meant. So this isn't new information. I think what changes is it's the coaching practices, it's the teaching practices. It's all well and good for me to say to someone, right, you need to hide this space. And I can say it out to the hopefully loads of people who listen to this and say you need to hide this space. And it's maybe a frustration of, I'm very fortunate as I get to teach this around the world and Fanatics DVDs and pod and YouTube, etc. Is I get a lot of feedback saying it's worked instantly, except going back to that boxing analogy I said earlier, it's all well and good. Pre or I or whatever, showing someone to hide those gaps, covering their chin. But then if you go back to your gym that is still slugging each other in the face and you put your hands up, but then your coach says, no, we're not training like that today. We're training with our hands by our sides. Like that defensive posture isn't reinforced into your training, and you're back to putting your hands by your sides again. It can drop off the table, and because none of the drills actually reinforce that idea. And it's frustrating in that I know it works. It's factual. The evidence is there that you cover the space, no one will get you. It's been evidenced for a long time. I mean, running man, one of the main positions I use, was in Jiu-Jitsu University. Like the Hibera brothers have been doing it for 2 decades. There's nothing new under the sun. The only thing that changes is that kind of discipline to stick to it. And one thing I would say is, so I use this example in seminars. Imagine you go to a jiu-jitsu class 3 times a week and you do 3 techniques every class. So let's say on average, you do 9 techniques a week. It's a rough guesstimate. Over the space of a year then, even conservatively, let's say you do 300, 400 techniques. Out of those 300 or 400 techniques, how much do you then adopt? 10%, 20%? Out of those that you even remember, how many can you get into your game? Maybe 10 if you're lucky. So there's a real big problem with how we learn jiu-jitsu as well. And it goes back to that ego, I think, as well, is that imagine there's a blue belt. Blue belt's the worst belt. In that you learn a new technique in class, you then go to use it in sparring, and you normally, you're training against your peers, your friends who are normally as good as your rivals. You try and do that technique, it doesn't work, you abandon it because you go back to your A game because you want to win, and then it just gets chucked on the floor and left, and you may come back to it in like a year's time, but that just happens repeatedly. And so how we then learn jiu-jitsu is a problem. Like we drill and then we go into sparring and we abandon. And so talking about this defensive idea to people as well, if they're listening, hopefully, is don't be disheartened. Like, if you want to do something, keep doing it and fail over and over and over again until you don't fail anymore. And if you have the option, if you're not like the lowest person in the room, any new technique that I have, like even myself, if I have like a new idea that I want to play with, I don't use it against my brown belts or black belts. I use it against my day one white belts, because they're going to show me like 3 holes in my technique. And I'm going, damn, I didn't even think of those. I need to solve that problem. I'll then move up to my higher white belts who might give me another 10 issues with my technique. I'm like, I never even thought about that. Cool. And I'll build my technique up. Instead of, if I just go and did that against my brown belts, they'd have 1,000 holes in my technique and they'd just break it and then I'd abandon, and it's another technique on the floor. And so anyone who's getting smashed in and wants to try and adopt defensive postures, don't just go and use it against brown belts. You're going to die. And you're going to get disheartened. You'll fail because you want to win. And go use it against whoever the easiest person in the room is. Let them play against you. Enjoy being on the back foot. Cover the gaps. They may find a different some holes in you that you hadn't considered. Close those gaps and then progress. Go up to the next available person. Do it to your peers. Then do it to people better. And I say just do that with every single technique. It's wild that we can spend so much money going to so many classes and throw so much away. There's a disconnect in how we should be learning jiu-jitsu there.
Yeah, man, Chris, what you said is so true, man, and I've been totally guilty of that myself. It's funny how I've learned a technique, say when I was a blue belt, and I went and tried it. It didn't work, of course, because it's my first time trying. Any skill takes time to develop, and you have to troubleshoot. But then I just throw it away and consider it something that's just not for me. It's not part of my game. And then it's not till years later as a brown belt that I see it again, and I'm kind of like, oh, wait a minute, hang on. My understanding of the art is better now, so I can apply it better. And now it turns out that thing I threw away, 6 years ago is actually quite useful. And so I love that you pointed that out. It's a very common trap people fall into, man. Yeah.
It's that's what I mean by when I said that blue belt's the worst belt, in that, and this is kind of like one of my criteria for knowing if someone's going from blue to purple belt, is blue belts can be very sharp in their A game, but their A game is so good that if you drag them out of it, they die. And because they don't want to lose, they have that little target on their back now with the blue belt. They don't want to lose the white belts. They don't want to seem that they're terrible at jiu-jitsu, and they just stick within their A game, and it becomes fantastic. It can have black belt killing A games, but their ego's trapping them. They won't learn anything new, and it's one of those things that I bash into their heads, is that no, you have to step out of your game. You have to develop a more rounded understanding of jiu-jitsu. That's kind of the path to the purple belt. But I think that idea, it should be across the board, and it's a definite blue belt trap, but it can be, even a good white belt can fall into that same trap. Like, I'm not going to lose to a one stripe white belt or something. They'll get their A game and they'll stick to it. And unless that kind of cycle is broken, progress gets a lot slower.
Yeah. Blue belt was definitely the belt that I think I suffered with the most, and in retrospect, it was mostly self-inflicted, like you're saying. You're pretty much describing me when I was a blue belt, so I can totally relate.
Just oh yeah. No, this isn't good to hear.
Well, there's something you said too, and this has been talked about before on the show, but we talk about like the ecosystem of a training room and how it's critical to student development. Like, everyone needs someone in the room they can easily control and submit, someone who's matched evenly with them in their skill level, and someone who can, decimate them technically, For more advanced, higher up people on the food chain, what are some of the things that you do to, what advice would you give to keep their defense better over time when training with much less experienced practitioners?
Well, I think one of the main benefits we found with teaching defense from day one is it made all the advanced people a lot sharper with their attacks, because we had to it makes everyone useful in the gym. As in, if I get a brand new person and just say, right, do not move your arms, glue them to your legs. Like, there has been instances where I've tied white belts up and denied them their arms. Like, if they're flailing a bit too much, and no, you lose arm privileges for today. Like, I'm going to tie your arms down, and all of a sudden they don't get submitted because I've tied their arms to their body. And so if they can kind of keep that discipline and keep their arms tight, it makes all the higher belts, have to work against everyone. But on the flip side of that is, I can then, I enjoy, because I get to roll with so many people, I can then let people get deeper into my defense. As in, I know the answer to every question is, right, I need to get them out of my armpits, but I'll let them get a bit deeper and see what happens. Like, it makes it interesting in that, I'll let people get me in submissions. I'll let them get me in arm bars, I'll let them get me in chokes and stuff, and I'll find my way out of it at that point. And I can then balance. And it's safer, as in, I don't want a very high level black belt tearing my head off. That's not how I'm going to learn defense. But against that same idea is, I'll let the white belts choke me. Cool, I'm getting out of this stuff. I'll let the blue belts choke me. Cool, I'm finding my way out of this stuff. And I'll work my way back up to people of my level. Because then, going back into competitions and stuff and rolling in different gyms, I then feel comfortable that, I can let a brown belt almost tear my arms off. And I'm happy. I trust my defense. I trust my knowledge of clearing the joints. I trust my knowledge of keeping my elbows tight. And especially because every technique is taught with context about controlling the armpit space. Everyone in the gym knows to hunt that space. Like, they know, right, this is how I hide it. I need to find it. And so they have sharper attacks, because when they get that kind of space on me, they don't let me have it back. And it means that even with little technique in the room, control is brilliant. And it's funny that for years you always hear position before submission, position over submission. And, for years it was like, yeah, that's obvious. I need to get a position before I do submission. It wasn't until maybe about 7 or 8 years in, maybe 9 years in, it was written on the inside of one of my gis, I think a 93 brand gi. It just had position over submission. And I suddenly clicked what that meant, as in always choose position over submission. Because if you lose position, you lose everything. But if you lose a submission but still have position, you haven't lost anything. Think of the Roger Gracie tactic. He's going to bury you in mount. He's going to go for his cross collar. If it fails, you just abandon and go back to the cross collar. He chose position over submission. That's kind of then that reinforces that for those beginners, is that they don't need to go hunting for triangles and rear naked chokes and arm bars. They just need to expose the armpits. And if they can do that, and they can do it consistently against myself and everyone else, then arm bars and everything's going to be dead easy. That's the important part. And it reinforces, again, what we've been hearing for years, but we kind of forget.
That's actually, yeah, basically the submission is a result of proper control. Yeah, that's a really, really a great thing. Yeah, it's a great thing for people to hear, man. Chris, I also like that you said that when you're rolling as an advanced practitioner, if you're rolling with, say, white belts or people much less technical than you are, that you'll commonly practice just lowering defensive walls and letting them get things that normally you wouldn't let people get. Do you find that as you do that over time with less experienced people, that it truly does allow you to be more effective with more advanced people doing the same things?
Weirdly, yes. In that, it's actually one thing that, when it comes to the current leg locks. Like, again, I've been very lucky to train with very good leg lockers. I've met John Danaher, I've met Gordon, I've met Craig, I've met Lachlan, and one thing that I've always found with like exceptional leg lockers is the bite they create on the hip. That is terrifying. And I think it's down to, my guesstimate is with the advent of like stuff like Meta Morris and with the ADCs having such great monetary recompense for people who compete, is it attracted smart people? Money attracts smart people. And then you had all these people doing, these submissions that weren't allowed in normal jiu-jitsu, like leg locks. People then started escaping them. So they then started to develop, better ways of controlling the joint, which is, controlling the hip, creating a more effective bite. And, that knowledge is so far ahead of pretty much anything else in jiu-jitsu at times. And with regular jiu-jitsu, with the old submissions like arm bars, that knowledge hasn't really caught up yet about control, not like it has with leg locks. Like, I haven't felt the same bite into my shoulder that I have into my hip from someone doing a really good leg lock. Maybe with EBI, that's, changing a little bit, but the control those paid people generated is wildly ahead. And so that's one thing that I then find is, one thing I like doing in seminars is I'll pick a brown belt or a black belt and I'll say, right, okay, I want you to armbar me, and I'm going to teach how to get out of an armbar when you're armbarring me. And I don't mean just holding my hands together. I mean, arm locked out, your hips to the ceiling, I'm going to find my way out. And it's only through learning that, about controlling those upper joints, exposing the armpits, that I know when someone's armbar isn't working because they haven't squeezed my shoulder. And it's the same with like a leg lock. I know if someone bites onto my thigh, I ain't getting out, I'm tapping. But if they're not controlling my thigh, I can move. And, it's the same with the whole, majority of leg locks aren't about grabbing your ankle back. That's the last thing you do, it's double trouble. You free the knee line. And that's why all of a sudden we generated really good thigh control. But isn't that the same for an armbar? Like if I grab hold of my wrist, I'm double troubling myself. But if I free my shoulder, I'm freeing the knee line again, or the elbow line. And unless we generate that kind of same knowledge that leg lockers have, and that applies to the armbar, I'm going to get out. And it's only through working my way back up and then feeling what a good armbar feels like compared to a terrible armbar that I now feel comfortable, even in front of like big audiences, especially at the Globetrotters camps where there's like 300 people watching. I'm like, right, okay, black belt, armbar me. Let's see what happens. And I'll know instantly the second they landed it, is it an actual good armbar? At which point I'll know when to tap or not. But majority of the time, that knowledge isn't there. And it's only through building up and respecting the knowledge that other people have built into leg locks and again, defense that has allowed me to trust it.
Hey, Chris, I have to ask you, when you're doing that practice at your seminars with letting people lock your arm out and stuff, has it ever backfired on you?
Not yet.
Okay, good.
But I imagine if people watch this and they go to one of my seminars, they're going to know to crush my shoulder and I'm going to look like an asshole. But there's two tricks I usually do. It's normally I ask people to get me in a bow and arrow choke or into a fully locked out armbar. And what also quite interesting is that majority of us have never actually done a proper armbar. Is that in training we hold our hands together, and all of a sudden as soon as our grip slips, we start tapping and our arm isn't actually locked out. So that's why a lot of times when you're in competition, like you think of Magalhães versus Verdum, I was there at the ADCC in Nottingham watching that, just screaming, and you think, oh my God, why isn't his arm broken? And it's because he was defending his shoulder. And it's the exact same idea here, is that a majority of people aren't bringing the armbar to term. Obviously Verdum's very good, but majority of people aren't bringing the armbar to term. So eventually when you get into a competition and you have some maniac who doesn't care about their joints, you can lock out the armbar and then you think, why isn't he tapping? This armbar should work. You've never actually done one. Like they're freeing their shoulder. You don't know you have to control the shoulder. And they're bridging, they're trying to strip their shoulder clean or whatever, conscious or unconsciously. And that is destroying your armbar. We don't have that in leg locks. We have good control and we know what a good one feels like because people end up crippled. If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean, those final braking mechanics are everything. Yeah. I mean, it's like at the end of the day, if you don't know how to finish off the braking mechanics of any technique, how dangerous is it really? You know what I mean? So
I haven't been knocked out yet, but there's always chance. Like, it's going to be on video someday of like me being an asshole and then getting starched. Awesome. But not today.
I love it though. I think it's awesome that you do that. I think it's it's definitely cool for the people attending the seminar to see someone live, allowing someone to apply a locked out technique and then explaining while you're going how you're escaping. That's a really cool thing, man.
I think being able to play it and figuring out this way of like how to build technique through the belts and actually use the different levels of people to build understanding into technique has allowed that I can trust it. That I can sit in front of all these people and go, actually, you know what? I know this works. Let's do it. If it doesn't, I'm going to look like an idiot. but I trust it enough to my arm isn't going to get broken in front of all these people.
That's awesome. I love it, man. That's really cool. That's really cool. Chris, I'll tell you what, man, we've reached a point of the show here. This is where I always play a game with my guests. This is a game called the Pummel. The Pummel is a series of random questions. Some of these have to do with jiu-jitsu. Some of them have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. But if you're down to play the Pummel, I'd love to play this lightning round game with you.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Question 1. What's the worst job you ever had in your life?
Worst job? I'd say, firefighter is a great job, but you do some awful stuff.
I can imagine.
Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, I hear you. How about a secret talent that you have?
Secret talent. I was once a classically trained singer many moons ago.
Really?
Like,
okay.
I think I actually saw an interview of Pete Davidson recently where he said that he took up singing lessons just because he can't sing, but he just wanted to like maybe belt out one day in front of his friends. And I roughly did the same. I did like a year of singing lessons. I haven't got a good voice, but I know how it should sound. And yeah, there you go. There's a secret talent that once existed.
That's amazing, dude. I love that. That's really cool. What do you think is the worst injury you've had in jiu-jitsu so far?
Worst injury. I think currently because I've got a herniated disc in the bottom of my back, I think that probably ranks pretty high because that upsets me every day.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you're going through that, man. That's definitely, I got a lot of friends that deal with that, and they say it is debilitating in many ways. So I hope that gets better, man. How long have you had that? Has it been there for a while?
I think quite a few years. It just gets a lot of sciatica down my left leg. So some days it'll lock out and I can't train, and then some days it's fine. So it's limiting how much I can kind of prep for like doing competitions, because all of a sudden I can be out for like a few weeks. And the last thing I want to do is go against a black belt who's a trained killing machine, and I've not had a good training camp beforehand.
Yeah, no, it's completely understandable. I hope you find a solution to it, man. I hope it gets better.
Thank you.
What do you think is your favorite bad food to eat?
Bad food?
Like junk food.
Oh, right. American food. Like I've been to the States now. I didn't go to the States until I was like 34 or whatever, it's 35. And I went over with a good friend of mine, Charles Harriott, and we did a tour, like a seminar tour, starting in Gainesville, Florida, ending in New York City, driving 2,500 miles up the East Coast. And he got it into his head that he wanted to inflict upon me every terrible, like Bojangles, Wendy's, like no McDonald's, just everything awful and nice, like. The idea of all you can eat wings, like I felt like PETA should be involved right now, because when we get to like 16 wings, you think 8 chickens died for this. And yeah, American, like British food is not like American food. And that is, yeah, I enjoy it when I'm there, but I shouldn't.
I like that you came to America and your friends took you on a coronary death tour. That's really like
excellent. I remember like in a hotel room in North Carolina in Asheville, just holding my guts, just like, I'm dying, Charles. We're not even anywhere out of the South yet. Like, I can't do this.
That's amazing. Yeah, dude, junk food and comfort food is something we do real well in the U.S. Definitely, and they can go. It can get real extreme too. Like there's such thing as like deep fried butter sticks in some places. Like if you go to like a carnival, they'll have like literally a stick of butter. You can deep fry it, and I've never gone quite that far. But my friends that have had it said it's actually pretty good. But I'm just, dude, I can't go quite that far. But
I feel my arteries actually tighten, like as you said that. Like, it's like preparing, like, no, Chris, don't do it.
That's awesome. Oh, man. Chris, what do you think was the scariest moment of your life?
Scariest? You've
traveled a lot. So
Again, I think going back to career in the fire is that I remember going up to a garden house, like a little garden, like a big garden shed, kind of like, outhouse that was on fire. And I remember going up to it with a friend of mine. And just as we got to within 10 feet of the door, we weren't aware that there was a Caligas cylinder inside, like a propane cylinder that suddenly went, and the flamethrower came out the door. And I turned face and I shat myself. Like I ran like a bastard. Like, I put that pretty high.
Wow, that's insane, man. I'm really happy that there's obviously no injuries, nothing serious happened to you from it, though, huh?
No, I'm happy that nothing happened, because that would have sucked.
That's crazy.
We wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, definitely not. Man, I was. It's funny you say that. I was watching a video on YouTube the other day where they were showing like a montage of gas ovens suddenly exploding, like where there happens to be surveillance cameras and stuff. And bro, I guess some people don't like. If you're a trained firefighter, you obviously understand the impact of and the significance of an explosion of a tank of propane or something like that.
Yeah.
But for regular people like me, like I didn't realize that it could send a person like outside if that thing explodes.
Yeah.
Like if there's no wall there, like they'll go through a window, they'll go through, like it'll send you hundreds of feet.
Like, I think TV has a lot to blame in that, one of the big ones is fat fryers. Like when you put water into like some fat that's on fire on like a stove or something. In that, and this was again something I only learned when I was on the job, is like it's like 1 liter of water will make like 1,800 liters of steam. So when that hits the bottom of the pan, because oil's lighter than water, that 1 cup of water is going to make 500, 600 liters of steam instantly, which is going to turn all that fat into an aerosol. And so you think 1 cup, a small mug of water, enough to fill a coffee cup into a fat fire. It creates a massive explosion, like 600 liters of steam suddenly aerating all that fire. Wow. And you think most people aren't going to suddenly just go chuck a single cup of coffee water onto a fire. They're going to chuck like a sink, a giant bowl full onto it. Yeah. And the explosions out of that. I mean, we used to do it as demonstrations, and you get engulfed in a fireball just from a single cup of water, and you're like, wow, like. When they say don't put water on oil fires, they really mean it.
Yeah. No, that's insane, man. That must be a really crazy aspect of the job, being a firefighter, is just learning all these kinds of things and like things that most people have no clue about. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of fun, like when you talked about like the impact of like the propane tank that was in there. Whenever you see films like where a guy's like that played out thing where there's an explosion behind the guy and he's just walking all cool. Like in real life, he'd probably be flying at the camera, like dragging on his face, and you know what I mean? It'd be way less cool looking.
No, you run. When you see that flamethrower come for the door, like you make Billy Big steps in the other direction.
Right, man. That's good. Well, I'm glad that you weren't injured by that explosion or anything else on the job, man. That's definitely. I commend you for doing a dangerous job like that and saving people. What do you think is your most hated position in jiu-jitsu to get stuck in?
I think preet, it would have been anything on the bottom, but learning defense has now made it that I can enjoy being on the bottom. Like I enjoy being on the bottom of side control and mount and all those things that you're told not to do, like turn face down under mount. It's my favorite things to do. Like I came like, we're told that you're going to give up your back, you're going to get choked. And no, you won't. Like it's a lie told by cheeky Brazilians, and you won't get choked at all. And I did, like, I may have come out of it whilst I was high. And I did wonder, like, I wonder if I can turn face down underneath it and be fine. And you can, as long as you keep your hips covered. Yeah. So even those places that really, like, you think this isn't fun, it can make it fun again. And if that's not an advert for making jiu-jitsu accessible for everyone, I don't know what is.
That's pretty good. I like that. That's a good answer, man. What do you think is your biggest phobia?
Biggest phobia? Heights. I hate heights, which made ladders suck. But heights, like, you put me on a high wall, my knees are going.
Really? So what's your threshold? Like how high up can you go before you start feeling like, oh crap, I should head back to the ground?
Or like a single flight of stairs. If I look over the banister of a single flight of stairs, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go over here.
Really?
Which again, maybe I chose the wrong job for a while.
I was gonna say, yeah. But hey, man, that shows a tremendous amount of courage, though, man. If you're afraid of heights,
stupidity. It's no courage. That it's stupidity. It's being young, dumb, and everything else.
That's awesome. Who is your? Let's see. Let me find another good question for you here. Who's your favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero. I don't know. I really like Daredevil. I think it's just because of the series with Charlie Cox.
Yeah.
Like that's some great stuff. Like that, those Netflix shows like Jessica Jones and maybe not Iron Fist, but definitely Luke Cage. Like literally those three, maybe four if you include Danny Rand. That's one of the main reasons I went to New York. Like I went through Harlem, I went through Hell's Kitchen. I was like, oh my God, this is where, like, it's kind of sad. But yeah, like, just watching those old Netflix shows, they're like 8 years old, whatever it is. That made New York so much fun for me because I going through, Times Square is obviously cool, but like Hell's Kitchen, like, Harlem, which maybe was a bit terrifying, but it seemed quite fun.
Yeah, some of those are so than others, but that's cool that you get to explore all around and go everywhere, man. Yeah, Netflix has done a pretty good job of like kind of resurging the superhero genre. It was such a good change from like the regular MCU. It was like how gritty it was and how real it was. Like David Tennant's villain in the Jessica Jones series. That's just absolutely insane. The Kingpin. It was just stunning. Kingpin. Bravo Netflix. I doff my hat to thee. The one that did it for me that I was real happy about was the Punisher series, because like Punisher was always one of my favorite heroes growing up, and man, the movies of the Punisher movies, I don't know if you've seen the Punisher movies of the past, but they were just, some of them were brutal. And so when they
I saw like the Thomas Jane one, and
so when they finally made like a good Punisher series, I was like, man, okay, the storyline was different. They changed the story, but I kind of like the way they modernized the story a little bit. But overall, it was way better than a lot of the movies of the past. So
he was awesome. He was such a great Punisher.
He was.
Like, he sold it. Like, again, they just did brilliant.
I agree 100%, man. If you could have a superpower, what would you choose?
I don't know. I think when I look at it in a realistic way, they all suck. Like, flight would make sense, like being able to get around and travel and do seminars. But I don't like the cold, which I guess makes England suck. Well, like the idea of teleportation kind of made sense until science ruined it and said, if you teleported, the Earth has moved since you teleported, and you just go up in space and die. And so I'm like, oh man, I have to look at it in a realistic sense. What would make? So I guess like, just flight, because I'd save so much on air fees.
You'd be a whole new definition to BJJ globetrotting for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not doing it for any kind of, altruistic reason. I just hate paying for like so many planes, man. Like, I've got to travel the world and do these seminars, and I'm forking out so much cash.
It's the TSA lines for me. I can't do the TSA lines are always stressful to me. But yeah, dude, the whole process, everything about flying sucks.
First time I ever met a TSA line, I was in it for 3 hours in Orlando. I was like, screw this all.
Horrible. No, it's the worst, man. I also appreciate the fact that you think a lot deeper about teleportation than I do, because you actually gave like some scientific reference. I always think of like, well, what if have you ever seen the movie The Fly? Like, what if it ends up in a situation like that, where a fly, where I get mutated or severely screwed up when I get out on the other end? But I respect the fact that you actually follow science. I'm just an idiot that watched The Fly in the early 90s. So
I think. So it's like, they've ruined it for me. Fuck scientists. They've said, like, if you actually did teleportation, you'd actually end up in the middle of space. Or if you did like a Star Trek version, the original you would have to die, and then the new you would be recreated. So does the new you get the same rights as the dead you? Yeah. Like, because you can't just be trying. One has to get unmade for the other one to be made. And so, like, the whole thing about teleportation, man, that science ruined it completely. Yeah. That's what keeps me up at night when I'm not thinking about jiu-jitsu.
Pesky scientists, man. I know. At the end of the day, I think if you old you dies and you do have a new you, that should at the very least you should get a fresh credit score, or you should get something out of it. If you know what I'm saying? Like, if it's a new start, man. It's like,
how can we both suck at this? Yeah. Like, I'm saying I want to fly because I get better airfares. You're like, I want to get teleportation because it's going to wipe out my bad credit score. Like, we'd suck. Like, Netflix did a show on us, we'd suck. We'd be a terrible defenders.
We don't deserve superpowers or any comic book about ourselves. Definitely not. Chris, who do you think's your favorite comedian?
I like a lot of the I love like John Mulaney and like, a lot of stuff that's come out of the States. Theo Von, I went when I was in the States. I went to see Theo Von, and
oh man, that's awesome.
Man, that guy's brain it baffles me,
bro.
And I know he does jiu-jitsu as well. Like, he does jiu-jitsu down in Nashville. So if there's ever a chance I get invited down to Nashville to do a seminar, that life completed for me. Like, seminar Theo Von. Like, Theo, if you're watching Fanatics in any way, convince your gym to book me.
Dude, I love Theo Von. It's so funny you said that. And yeah, dude, the way his brain, like the lines, the quick lines he comes up with out of nowhere. I can sit there and watch him all day. Like, it's fascinating.
It's stunning.
It's unbelievable the way his brain works. So yeah, very good choices. I also like John Mulaney, man. John Mulaney's really funny too. Good choices. If you could pick 4 faces to put on Jiu-Jitsu's Mount Rushmore, what 4 faces would you pick?
4 faces on Rushmore. I don't know. I think it'd just be GOATs at that point. Like, Haffer's on there just because that man is a wizard. Like, I don't believe in teleportation, but he figured it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that Haffer's on there. Roger, just because I like Ryan Hall's kind of explanation of Roger, and that he maximized his positional dominance to overcome even equal or better technique. And I'm like, yeah, that guy figured out the tactics for it. Marcelo, because he's just the sweetest looking guy. Like, you can't have anyone who's that happy and that cheerful and that friendly not on. I mean, all the people who do our sport a credit, who, who aren't necessarily, absolute, they're obviously all monsters, but are just good people who are like, you'd love to just sit down and just like have a conversation like this with. Weirdly enough, I went to Mount Rushmore. I did a seminar in South Dakota, and they nicely took me over to it. Didn't realize how small it was.
Yeah,
like
I've never seen it, but I've heard that. I've heard almost everyone that goes has said that to me. It seems it's smaller than it seems, huh?
Yeah, they take it on like a wide angle lens or something, because I got there and I was like, is that it? Like, this is strange. Like, you guys are celebrating this mound? Like,
dude, it's funny? I had a friend of mine that went there, and he said that they looked it up on Google, and apparently Mount Rushmore has a Google, like, you can leave Google reviews for it, and he said that there's a lot of people that left like 1-star or 2-star reviews saying like, like, worst monument, like, this monument's not as big as they made it seem. It's like, dude, who's leaving 1-star reviews on Mount Rushmore?
On a monument.
Like, bro, what are you doing? You know what I mean? But whatever. I've heard people say that though. It's funny.
Like, I'd say that's one of the, I'm slightly sidetracking, but it's one of my favorite things about jiu-jitsu is it's the brilliant sport. It's a lot of fun, but it's that you can have conversations like this. I mean, we've known each other now for an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I've loved every second of this.
Bro, I'm
and,
enjoying it. Yeah. So likewise.
It's the idea that, you can go anywhere in the world and you have a friend, even if you don't speak the same language and there's cultural barriers or whatever. If you have a role with someone and it's a good role, it's a good dance, it's good chemistry, like, man, let's go get food, let's go get a beer afterwards. And it's the fact that, it's taken me to parts of the world that I never thought I'd end up. It's always off the beaten track, like, Rapid City, South Dakota. In what lifetime would have ended up in Rapid City? Yeah. But here I am at Mount Rushmore trying to dodge coyotes. And that blows my mind about this sport. Like, if when people can harness the fact that it is such a great vehicle for getting around and exploring and having friends everywhere, it enriches your life way more than just appearing on some mats in dingy warehouses in Stafford. Like, it's beautiful.
It is. It's very well said, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well, so I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
Chris, final question for the Pummel game, my friend. If a zombie apocalypse breaks out right now, what do you do?
Man, right now, are you watching Last of Us?
I played the video game. The game was great. I played the first game. I haven't played the second one. The first game was awesome.
No,
but I haven't seen the show.
I'm doing the game alongside the show right now. Okay, I'm trying to stay ahead of the show on the game.
Cool.
And that is like, yeah, I realize that, especially on that, the first part where, spoilers with Sarah and stuff like that, I would suck in a zombie apocalypse. Like, we have no guns here, dude.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how many guns you people had. Like, what am I going to do? Like, jiu-jitsu is fun, but like, I can cover my armpits. So it's just going to expose my head at that point.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I like, what am I going to do in the zombie apocalypse? Die. Like, I'm first on the bucket list of that one. Like they've got me done. You guys have got way better chances than I have.
Well, dude, you know what makes me self-conscious whenever I see like zombie shows or zombie movies is they always portray that the people that are surviving and doing the best seem to have some kind of like really good technical knowledge. Like they know, understand how like mechanics work, or they understand how to formulate medication or how to apply like really high level first aid. And I'm just sitting there watching like, yeah, dude, I would be the most useless. I'd be like the absolute caboose of the train, bro. Like I can't fix anything. Like I can't cook. I'm literally like, if you want me to jiu-jitsu a zombie, like you said, I'll probably get bit. I'll be the first one infected. But yeah, it really makes me self-conscious about like how effective I would actually be in a post-apocalyptic world,
Like I just got to the part of the game where you have to go fix up the car. And I'm like, if that was me, done.
Yeah,
like
over, yeah.
If I can't look up YouTube at that point to like know how to fix that specific thing, that's it. I can't just look at a car and go, I know what the problem is here. Yes. Like that's it. I'm dead. I'm in that garage. Like I'm getting eaten.
I'm telling you, that's exactly you and me both. We'd be stuffed in a trunk, half dead somewhere for sure. Oh man, that's so funny. With The Last of Us, though, I will say I really like the angle they took. I think that was a really cool, unique way that the apocalypse happens in the first place. Like traditionally, it was always like there's a virus and then one person bites another and blah blah. I thought the whole idea of the fungus, like breathing in spores and that whole thing. It's a plant kind of thing that's growing in people. It was a really cool spin on that. It's very unique. So I'll go check out the show. I haven't watched the show yet, but I did see that they started a series, and that is pretty cool.
It's really good. Like playing the game and watching the show, I'm like, they've done it a good service. This is up there. And again, it's like one of those terrifying things of like, it's like cordyceps is real, and that's what it does to ants. And so when you see like the images of like the sprouts coming out of people's heads in the show or the game, and then you see actually like real life Google images of it doing it to ants, I'm like, whoa, that's chilling. Like they've taken something really, really close and made it horrifying.
Yeah, it is. I've seen that same video where it implants in the brain of an ant and it makes it climb to the top of a branch or something and jump off basically, or it rots out.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is.
Dude, it's so worrying.
Dude, yeah, nature's scary. And Chris, that was the final question for the Pummel game, my friend. Congratulations, you win. You got your double underhooks.
No, you don't. I deny those.
No, you got your double underhooks.
I get them. Thank God.
You won the game. Yeah,
dude.
No, I lost.
Oh, dude, like getting double underhooks these days, like Christmas Day. The fact you've said that and I get double underhooks, like I never get those anymore. Like, this day is going on my calendar.
That's awesome. So, Chris, let me ask you, man. One of the primary targets for submissions in jiu-jitsu is obviously the neck. What do you think are some general rules for defending chokes when someone has your back? What are things you like to preach to people to avoid getting choked out from the back?
So, especially we're looking at any choke, it's about accuracy. As in, we want to close off the sides, the arteries, and they're not bone. They're essentially McDonald's straws, and the amount of effort to close them is minuscule. And I think one of the things that I try and preach about chokes is that try and find the minimum amount of effort actually required to do a choke. Like do a rear naked with just enough. Like imagine again you're closing a straw, just enough just to like pinch it close, and you're gonna get a choke as long as you stay patient. And that would be the problem, is that accuracy. Is that if your accuracy is terrible, or if I can fuck with someone's accuracy, I can survive a choke. And then you come across those guys, in competition, you can wrap them up in a rear naked and you're going crazy on their neck. You're like, why isn't this guy going out? Is he got gills? Is he breathing out of his arsehole? And, but no, it's just your technique sucks. Like you're choking the side of their neck. There's no arteries there. And, if you can do a choke with the least amount of effort, that once you apply effort, it's always going to work. And so it's kind of like and then as soon as you kind of like understand it's all about accuracy, the second someone's behind my back, I'm just trying to get the corner of my shoulder in the middle of their sternum, because then I know the accuracy is wrong. It's going to crank my neck. Like they're still going to try and crush my spine, but they're not going to choke me. And again, it's one of those party tricks is that, as long as I can try and sniff the armpit that's choking me, I can usually find my way out. And the last thing I want to do is try and use my hands to try and peel it, because then I expose my armpits. They're going to actually get control of my hips, and then I'm locked in. It's safer for me, and I've had much better success keeping my arms by my sides, denying good body control, and then the second an arm appears, just turning in that direction, and then just messing with their accuracy. And then you have, again, if that isn't explained, people are then squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. They're burning their arms out, and they go, "Wow, this guy's got gills." No, your technique sucks. So it's one of those. It also improves the control in the gym. Like if you say to people, right, you have to get a choke with minimal effort, they end up controlling the hips better, so they have time to apply that minimal effort choke. If you're terrified that this is, again, one of those, I'm going down a rabbit hole. If your control sucks, like in like an arm bar or anything like that, you're going to rush the submission. People get injured and you do poor technique. If you knew that your control was perfect, if they could not escape and you had infinite time, would you rush the technique? No. And then people wouldn't get injured. So what do we focus on? Do we focus on the finish, or do we focus on the control? Because I think if we focus on the control, our submissions get better and we understand our accuracy better. So that's one thing I'd say about defend the neck, is that people's control is normally terrible. They forget about they've got even legs wrapped around me. So as long as I just turn the corner and try and get that's why we put our backs to the floor. But all I'm trying to do is just defeat their accuracy. If that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. That's an excellent description, man. You know, Chris, you've done such a tremendous job laying out all these thoughts and concepts in your instructional that you have with us. So I want to make sure that we plug that here today. If you guys are interested in growing this aspect of your game, if you're interested in becoming better at defense, Chris has a tremendous instructional with us called How to Defend Against Everyone. And it's available right now at BJJFanatics.com. So you guys be sure to go check that out. Chris, let me ask you, man, in closing, what are some of your major goals for 2023? What are some things you hope to accomplish this year by the time the year's over?
Oddly, I'm actually coming back out to the States in March. Cool. So I'm gonna try and travel around and hopefully meet some people on the mats. And I'm actually coming back out to Boston, back to Danvers in March. I think it's just got confirmed that I get to record another 2.
Amazing.
So I'm really looking forward to that. And again, it's just living that jiu-jitsu lifestyle now. I want to go east. I've been west. I've done Europe. I've done a lot of it, more America than probably most Americans at this point. But the goal now is go east. I want to go Thailand. I want to go Cambodia, Japan. Just explore that way and spread the good word about defense over there. Be a missionary for this.
That's incredible. That is so cool, man. Well, man, I really do. I think it's awesome that you are traveling the world, sharing these concepts and knowledge that you've accumulated over the years. And man, I would love to, if you ever make your way to where I'm at, I would definitely love to link up with you, man. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. I'd love in March. I'm going to be in the Boston NYC area, so. Yeah, if you're free, man, I'll hit you up and we'll get some mat time in.
I would love to. Unfortunately, I actually live abroad, man. I live in Brazil, but so I'm remote. Yeah. So, but if you're ever down here, man, yeah.
Maybe I'll end up in Brazil one day as well.
Oh, dude, you got to come. You got a place to stay. Just come. Just let me know when you're going to be here. We'll take care of you when you're down here.
Absolutely.
Awesome, buddy. Well, folks, unfortunately, we're fresh out of time. Chris, I've really enjoyed this conversation a lot, man. I appreciate you taking the time to be here today. It was so cool hearing about your interesting background and introduction to jiu-jitsu. You have a very unique intro, which is always really cool to hear about. And man, I loved how deep we dove today on defensive measures in jiu-jitsu. I think it's an aspect of jiu-jitsu that's obviously critically important, and I appreciate you giving such a great layout of how people can become better at that. So you're welcome back on the show anytime, man. I'd love to have you back in the future.
No, I'd love to come back. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, sir. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for that, my friend. I really appreciate that. For anyone out there that wants to keep up with Chris, it's real easy to do so. His handle is pretty much the same thing everywhere. His name, again, Chris the Villain Pains. You can find him on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. His website is chrispainsbjj.com. If you guys are ever anywhere near Stafford, England, Fighting Fit BJJ is the gym that's home base for him. But again, he travels all over the world doing seminars. So make sure you guys follow him on social media. media to keep up with where he's at. If for whatever reason you can't pin him down in person, luckily you can learn from him anywhere in the world here at BJJFanatics.com. His instructional, again, is called How to Defend Against Everyone, and it's a great instructional for all levels. So if you're new getting crushed, if you're old, if you're more advanced, wanting to improve your defense, this is a great place to start. So make sure you guys check that out. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics Podcast.